What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey May. So in this episode, going to catch up on a lot of things I haven't really spoke about in the last month. There's a lot that's been going on in the NBA that I haven't talked about, unfortunately, and obviously the NFL draft as well. I'll have an NFL draft episode coming out this week with my friend Spencer Bono. We're going to give a recap of the draft and basically break down some of our favorite picks and some of our favorite team drafts overall. But in this episode right now, I'm going to give an update on some things in the NBA. Not going to dive too deep into the NBA playoffs. I'm going to talk about maybe the current series and where they're at really quick. But I will talk about the NBA draft lottery a little bit more in depth. And then after that, I'll give an MLB update, talk about the Red Sox and where they currently stand. Then I'll dive into the Baltimore Orioles and their struggles, along with talking about the Colorado Rockies, who have had just an abysmal season overall. So let's start out with the NBA draft lottery. The Dallas Mavericks did win the NBA lottery, getting the first overall pick with just a 1.8% chance at the number one pick. They ended up winning. That was the fourth lowest odds in the 40-year history of the draft lottery to successfully land the top pick. Things fell apart pretty quickly for Dallas, obviously, at the end of last season after they traded Luka Doncic. And then Anthony Davis got hurt. Kyrie Irving both got hurt. Kyrie obviously out for the whole season. Davis missed a good amount of games for about a month or two after he was traded, and then he did make it back by the end of the season. But things did fall apart for that team, and then all of a sudden they land the first overall pick. So obviously some things did go their way. Now this brings up some questions about whether or not the NBA draft lottery is rigged. And to some degree, you can think it is, and it can be a very valid point because it's pretty crazy that the Charlotte Hornets and the Utah Jazz can never land the first overall pick despite years and years of tanking and falling down the draft order through the lottery each and every year. It's very disappointing if you're a fan of the Hornets or the Jazz. The Jazz this year have the fifth overall pick. The Wizards have the sixth, and the Charlotte Hornets have the fourth pick. If you look at these odds from last year and this year, the Wizards have the sixth pick this year despite having the highest odds to be number one, which I understand sometimes the ping pong balls don't go your way, but it is pretty crazy that Utah had a 19% chance at a top three pick last year. They ended up picking 10th. Charlotte had a 13.3% chance at the number one pick last year, which was the third highest, and also a 38.6% chance at a top three pick. But they ended up falling all the way down to sixth in the draft order. And then this year, Charlotte, Washington, and Utah were all tied with a 14% chance to land the number one overall pick. And each of them had a 52.1% chance at a top four pick, but they ended up picking 4, 5, and 6. Charlotte at 4, Utah at 5, and Washington at 6 in this upcoming NBA draft. It's pretty miraculous how 2 years in a row, long shot teams landed the number one overall pick. Atlanta had a 3% chance last year at the number one overall pick, where they ended up drafting Zachary Ricochet, and Dallas had a 1.8% chance at the number one pick this year, and obviously now they have the rights to go out and draft Cooper Flagg. I'm going to do some more NBA draft insight and do some mock drafts probably in the next few weeks. As of right now, I know Cooper Flagg is the number one consensus overall pick, but I feel like there are some guys in this year's draft that are getting slept on a little bit. I think Ace Bailey can be the best player in this year's draft. I'll give more of my thoughts once I do a little bit more research, but I think Ace Bailey is the best player in this year's draft the way things stand right now. So overall, this is the top 10 picks in this year's draft. You have the Mavericks at 1, Spurs at 2, Sixers at 3, Hornets at 4, Jazz at 5, Wizards at 6, Pelicans at 7, Nets at 8, Raptors at 9, and Rockets at 10. The Brooklyn Nets are in a really good spot. They have 4 first-round picks in this year's draft. I know the lottery didn't go their way. They wanted to get a top 5 pick or a top 4 pick. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, unfortunately, but they do have a lot of draft picks to work with. So if they did want to move up, they could go and do that. They have the 8th pick, 19th pick, the 26th pick, and the 27th pick in this year's draft. Then you add 36 picks overall in the next 7 years, including this year's draft. But they have 36 picks in the next 7 drafts, which is the most in the NBA. They also have $60 million in cap space to work with, which is the most in the NBA as well. And they could go out and get even more assets if they want to trade Nick Claxton or Cam Johnson, which they could go out and do. Sean Marks has done an excellent job being their GM. I know things haven't really gone their way when they've gone all in. Obviously, they came up short in the KD, Kyrie, and James Harden era. But now they're really gearing up, and they're in a position to go out and get a big superstar, maybe even 2 of them, whether or not they want to go trade for somebody or sign somebody on the open market. They could go out and do that with all the cap space they have to work with and also the draft flexibility they have as well. They could go out and get a big name piece this offseason or even wait another year if they wanted to. We'll have to see what Sean Marks wants to do there. So now let's talk about the NBA playoff series and where things currently stand. So the Minnesota Timberwolves are down 3-1 after a loss last night by 2 points against Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, I thought, would win this series in probably 6 games before the series began, so it's not shocking to see them up 3-1. Oklahoma City is just the better team, and even though Minnesota, they're built for the playoffs, obviously with their size, they have a lot of height in their lineup. Add in how great they are defensively and how good of a roster depth they have. They obviously are a team that's built for the playoffs. But Oklahoma City, I felt like at the end of that series against Denver, I know they took, 7 games to take Denver out. But it seems like they figured things out in the last 3 or 4 games of that series against Denver. They really started clicking and finding, what was going wrong and what was going right. And it seems like they're just, fully locked in now. I don't expect them to lose more than 1 game in the rest of this series to Minnesota. And then whoever they match up with in the finals, the way Oklahoma City looks right now, I think they win the NBA Finals. We'll obviously have to see how things work out, with the East. I think if they play the Knicks, they win that series in 5. I think Indiana could take an extra game from them and maybe force a 6-game series. But I do think Oklahoma City, this is their year to win, considering how close they are right now to the finals. Then obviously you add in, I think they're the best team overall with the way things currently stand. As for the East, it's obviously going to be a battle. I thought the Pacers would win this series in 5 games before it began, which I know is a very much a hot take to most people, but I thought the way Indiana looked in that series against Cleveland, they were just fully locked in and zoned in completely. So I wasn't really shocked to see them take out Cleveland, even though I thought that series would go 7 games, and I sided with Cleveland. Since I sided with Cleveland all year, I thought this was their year to maybe go out and win. Obviously, they ended up coming up short pretty heavily against Indiana. And the way Indiana looked in that series, when they were facing either the Knicks or the Celtics, I thought Indiana, the way they were playing, they would beat either the Celtics or the Knicks. I thought the Knicks, they would beat in 5 games. Obviously, it's a 2-1 series lead right now. They're up 2-1 with Game 4 tonight at 8 o'clock in Indiana. It's going to be a big-time game there. Indiana does not want to lose this game because now if they do, and it ends up being a 2-2 series heading back to New York, it's a completely new series, and you've lost all momentum. So they need to win this game tonight, especially considering it's at home, and they lost, obviously, a tough Game 3. They won pretty miraculously in Game 1 against the Knicks. They were down by 9 points with 52.5 seconds left. They were down by 14 points with about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left, and they found a way to somehow come back thanks to Aaron Nesmith being lights out from 3, and the Knicks just let him take too many open threes in those last 3 minutes, or the last 4 minutes. Nesmith had 20 points in that fourth quarter, and the Knicks were just letting him shoot. It's like they were up by 35 points, and they were just trying to let the clock run out. They would just let Nesmith take rhythm threes wide open, and obviously ended up coming back to bite the Knicks. They ended up losing that game, and obviously Tyrese Halliburton had a big-time play at the end of that game, which Halliburton has been awesome to watch in the playoffs, and this is a guy that I was never the biggest fan of. I liked Halliburton, but I never saw him as necessarily a superstar. But he's definitely working his way into that category, the way he's played in the playoffs. When you think about a superstar, you think about a guy that elevates in the biggest moments and elevates the guys around him. Halliburton has done just that in the playoffs this year, elevating everybody around him and also elevating his team as a whole, making big-time shot after big-time shot. After Game 2, at one point, he was 11 for 12 on game-tying or go-ahead shots in the last 2 minutes of NBA games this season. So after Game 2, in 12 game-tying shot attempts or go-ahead shot attempts in the last 2 minutes of a game, he was 11 for 12, which is ridiculous. I mean, he's been clutch all season long. And another stat I want to point out, this one's from ESPN, and this was after Game 2. He is 3rd all-time in most game-tying or go-ahead field goals in the final 5 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime since the 1997 playoffs. And in the 2025 postseason, he's 3 for 3 on those attempts, whether it's a game-tying or go-ahead field goal in the final 5 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime, which is very, very impressive. I mean, he has been locked in the biggest of moments. And that's why I think you can consider him a superstar. Whether or not he's on the same level as Giannis or Jokic or SGA right now, I know a lot of those guys score a lot of points and probably more points than Halliburton scores, so that's why Halliburton's not getting the respect he necessarily deserves. But it shouldn't always be about just points. You look at what he adds to that team, obviously as a playmaker, obviously as a clutch shooter. He might not be putting up 45 points a night, but in the biggest of moments, he has been clutch and been coming up time and time again in the biggest of moments. So I definitely think he deserves some more praise than he's getting. And I know he got a lot of praise after Game 2. And then in Game 3, he was a little bit passive. I wanted to see him be more aggressive in the last 5 minutes of that game. And maybe that's something that he addresses tonight. I think he needs to be the guy with the ball in his hands, either him or Siakam. Pascal Siakam, as I've mentioned now in the podcast many of times, he's the most underrated player in the NBA. You saw how great he was in Game 2. You see how versatile he is defensively and then offensively as well. A great slasher, a guy that can get downhill anytime he wants and also can score in a multitude of ways. He's a very good player, and I think the most underrated player in the NBA. The way things stand right now, though, the Pacers need to win tonight in Game 4. As for the Knicks, winning Game 3, they used a different formula in Game 3 with Tom Thibodeau using, I think it was 9 players in that game, which is a lot more than he usually does. He usually only has a 7-man rotation, but you saw that being a downside to their offense and their defense in late moments. Just guys ended up being gassed and obviously not being as effective in later minutes because of how many minutes they played early on. So it seems like he figured out a formula that works, and that's using a few more guys, especially in the early minutes of the game. So then in crunch time, a lot more of your important pieces are ready to go and are more refreshed rather than being, gassed and tired in the last moments of the game. I think the Pacers end up winning tonight, and I think they end up losing in Game 5 in New York, and then it ends up being Pacers winning Game 6 in Indiana to close out the series. Before the series began, I thought Pacers in 5. I thought they were the better team overall, especially considering how good they got offensively. A very versatile team on offense, can score in a lot of ways with Nembhard being a great scorer, Mathurin being an underrated scorer, Siakam being really good, and Halliburton being a big-time player as well. They have a lot of guys that can score and beat you in a lot of ways, and they also use a very fast pace, which can tire out teams, and that obviously ended up being something that maybe played to their advantage in that late moments of Game 1 where they were down by 9 points with 52 seconds to go. With their quick-paced offense, it plays to their advantage because they can go down the court and get a shot off in the first 4 or 5 seconds without wasting 20 seconds on the shot clock before trying to get a shot up. They can do that very, very quickly, go down the court and find a way to score. So that obviously plays to their advantage. And Game 1 wasn't their only game where they came back, late in the game in the playoffs. You saw in Game 5 in Milwaukee, they were down by 7 points with 34 seconds left in overtime, ended up winning that game. Then in Game 2 against Cleveland, they were down by 7 points with 46 seconds left and ended up winning that game. And then in Game 1 against the Knicks, they were down by 9 points with 52.5 seconds left and ended up coming back and winning that game in overtime. Tyrese Halliburton had a heroic game, obviously hitting a big-time shot at the end of regulation, which was almost a three-pointer. His toe was on the line. So the game ends up going to overtime, and the Pacers still end up winning. But it would have been pretty embarrassing for Halliburton if he ends up losing that game in overtime after making the choking gesture to the New York crowd, the same gesture that Reggie Miller once made to that crowd. If he ends up losing that game in overtime, that ends up being a big-time meme and also would be a big momentum shifter for the Knicks, even though it's a one-game, thing at the end of the day, and it would be only 1-0 of a series lead for the Knicks. That would have been a big piece of momentum if the Knicks found a way to win that game, after almost, losing a 15-point lead in the last, 2 minutes and change of that game. But obviously the Pacers didn't have to worry about that. They got the win. And then follow that up with a big-time win in Game 2 with 39 points out of Pascal Siakam. He ended up finishing that game with 15 shots made in 23 attempts, had a plus 16 on the night, 5 rebounds and 3 assists. He was absolutely phenomenal to watch. Halliburton only had 14 points in this game. He did nearly have a triple-double, though. He had 8 rebounds and 11 assists. But Siakam was the story of the game for the Pacers in Game 2. And then in Game 3, with the Knicks' backs against the wall, the need to win this game on the road in Indiana, and Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns came up big. Brunson ended up finishing the game with 23 points. He did struggle shooting the ball a little bit, just 6 of 18 from the floor, but 23 points overall was good enough for the Knicks to get that win. Karl-Anthony Towns was awesome in the fourth quarter. He finished with 24 points and 15 rebounds off 3 of 7 shooting from 3. He had some big-time shots in that game and also was a lot more aggressive driving down the lane. You could see he was trying to go down the lane with a lot more authority in that game, especially late in those moments. He was driving down the lane and getting to the paint pretty easily, and that's something that the Knicks need to see from him is Karl-Anthony Towns playing aggressive, since he is tough to stop when he's playing aggressive because he can beat you in a lot of different ways, whether it's shooting the ball from 3 or it's driving down the lane and getting to the bucket with authority. The Knicks need to see him playing aggressively tonight. That's going to be a difference maker for them. We'll see what they do with the rotation. I do expect Tom Thibodeau to end up using a 9-guy rotation again, considering it did work in Game 3. Mixing that up in the 7-man rotation just has not worked for them year after year in the playoffs. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the NBA playoffs and the way things currently stand. Now I'm going to move on to talk about the Boston Red Sox, who just lost a big piece of their lineup. Alex Bregman just suffered a quad injury, which is being reported as a significant quad injury during the Friday afternoon game. The Sox ended up blowing out the Orioles in that game 19-5, but the injury obviously ends up being a big difference maker for them. Alex Cora said it may be similar to the quad injury that Bregman suffered in 2021 that made him miss around 2 months. That's a major loss for this Red Sox lineup. Bregman has been so reliable and one of the best hitters in baseball this season. Per Baseball Savant, he's in the 98th percentile in batting run value, the 98th percentile in squared up percentage, the 94th percentile in chase percentage, and the 90th percentile in whiff percentage. All of those are very impressive metrics there from him. He is .299 for a batting average on the season with 11 home runs and a .938 OPS. Before the Bregman injury, I thought the Red Sox would find a way to make all of these pieces work and fit in the same lineup and have it be, a very productive lineup. But now with Alex Bregman being out, this lineup's going to take a major hit without him. I think before the injury happened, I thought the best lineup for the Red Sox would have been Bregman at third base, Christian Campbell at first base, which I said 3 weeks ago when Tristan Casas got hurt. I was telling all of my friends and everybody I knew that they should maybe try Christian Campbell at first base since he has a bigger build at first base. He's around 6'3" or 6'4", so has the height, and also plays second base and shortstop. You can move him over to first base. He obviously knows how to play, with good footwork, especially considering he was a middle infielder. So I thought he could maybe go and play first base, which now the Red Sox are giving him reps at first base as of late. So it seems like, they might have followed what I was thinking. But when Tristan Casas got hurt, I thought Campbell would be a good option at first because the Red Sox needed lineup flexibility, and that was obviously a hole, not having anybody as a backup first baseman. So in my potential dream lineup before this Bregman injury, I thought Campbell at first base, Rafaela at second, Jarren Duran in center, Masataka Yoshida in left field, and then Rafael Devers stays a designated hitter. I know a lot of people want to keep Rafaela in center, but he can't play middle infield, and the way this Red Sox lineup looks, they have a lot more outfielders than they do infielders. I think Rafaela maybe putting him at second base at least every other night just to give this lineup some flexibility would be a good idea, but obviously that seems like that's not going to be the case now with Bregman being hurt as well. This plan of mine is completely out the window, but I thought with this lineup, having Masataka Yoshida in it would be huge for the Red Sox, considering how great he is as a contact hitter and how much the Red Sox have struggled in situational hitting with runners in scoring position, or they need to just move a runner along. They've been really struggling with that all season long. They need a guy that can put the ball in play like Alex Bregman, and Masataka Yoshida, I think, is the best contact hitter on the Red Sox. I'll get to that in just a minute. But I want to talk about Marcelo Meyer, who made his MLB debut on Saturday, had his first MLB hit on Sunday, and after the Bregman injury, the Red Sox had no option but to call him up. What concerns me with Meyer, or what I should say is what concerned me with Meyer, was that he was in the minor leagues for 4 years and change after being drafted, as a top pick in the MLB draft. I know that it's common practice, historically in Major League Baseball to wait years in the minors to develop, but most top draft picks nowadays are up to the major leagues in their first 2.5 years. So I know that's a little bit of a concern for me. That was a worry of mine when he was in the minor leagues and never made it up, was that it took 4 years and change to make it to the major leagues. Does it always work to rush a guy up and get them up to the major leagues in their first 2 or 2.5 years? No, that's not always the case. It doesn't always work, but it was somewhat a concern it took this long. He did hit very well at the minor league level, and hopefully that does translate, for the long term in the major leagues. He's 3 for 12 so far, and I don't think it's necessarily a home run transition to the major leagues for him. I think he's going to struggle, and it's going to take some time to adjust. But obviously, the Red Sox had no option but to call him up. And with him being a former top pick and obviously being a major prospect, the Red Sox obviously have a lot of promise on their hands with Campbell, Meyer, and Anthony all being young prospects. And if one or two of those guys pan out, the Red Sox will be in a really good position to win in the future and contend. So now moving on to Rafael Devers, who has been absolutely awesome for the Red Sox over the past month. A lot of these stats I collected on Sunday, so they're not going to include, Monday's game against the Milwaukee Brewers. But since April 30th, Rafael Devers is number one in the game of baseball in batting average, and this is from April 30th into Sunday's game against Baltimore. He's been hitting .402 for batting average, .1219 for OPS. So that's the number one batting average in baseball and the number 2 OPS in baseball over that stretch since April 30th. Also has 30 runs batted in, number one in the game of baseball over that stretch. With 17 strikeouts to 16 walks, he's been seeing the ball very well as of late. When Tristan Casas got hurt, everyone was upset with Rafi for not being willing to take some reps at first base in practice. I understand that he should be a team player and should be willing to do whatever it takes to win. But I didn't think at the time when this drama was going on that he would be a slam dunk at first base. He doesn't really have the footwork or the glove, I don't think, to necessarily be a very good first baseman. Getting his glove down was the issue at third base. It wasn't really his arm. So I think first base would be a struggle for him, but he's been hitting really well. And obviously a lot of the drama that was around him, fielding-wise, has really been quieted because of how great he's been at the plate. On the year, he's a 58.8% hard hit percentage, which is number 3 in the game of baseball. A 32.9% whiff percentage, which is tied for 11th highest in the MLB with Aaron Judge. But with how well those two guys have been swinging the bat, you'll be happy with the swings and misses. With Alex Bregman now hurt, I still do not expect the Red Sox to put him back at third base. At this point, he's your DH of the future. You're not going to throw him at third base or first base the way things currently stand. And obviously considering how negatively he reacted to that situation, I don't think the Red Sox want to go down that road again. Carlos Narvaez has been great as well since April 30th. Among batters with 60 plate appearances, he has an 11.02 OPS, which is 5th best in the MLB among batters with 60-plus plate appearances since April 30th, and also has a 386 batting average over that stretch, number 2 in the major leagues, just behind Rafael Devers, with a 649 slugging percentage as well, which is number 8 in the major leagues over that stretch. A very good under-the-radar offseason move by Craig Breslow and has been a major piece of this Red Sox offense over the past couple weeks. One thing I just want to preface again is a lot of these stats that I mentioned I collected on Sunday, so obviously things are going to change a little bit over how they've been hitting over the past couple weeks, considering, I'm not including Sunday's game or Monday's game in a lot of these numbers. Christian Campbell has been struggling heavily as well. In his last 15 games since April 30th heading into Sunday, he was just 5 for 61 with a home run, 3 runs batted in, 21 strikeouts to 4 walks, 3 runs scored, an .082 batting average, and a 138 on base percentage with a 270 OPS. That's just as bad as it can get. And as I mentioned, these stats are from April 30th and then all the way up until this Sunday's game against the Baltimore Orioles. So it's April 30th through basically May 24th, since this doesn't include Sunday's game against the Baltimore Orioles on May 25th. But he's in the 15th percentile in strikeout percentage in the major leagues. He's in the 24th percentile in whiff percentage on the year as well. He's become much less patient over the last 2 weeks. He walked a lot early on in the season. In his prior 21 games before April 30th, he walked 15 times in 91 plate appearances and had a 280 batting average with an 809 OPS over that stretch. And now since then has become a much less reliable taking pitches at the plate. He's been obviously walking a lot less. He has to be more patient at the plate. I think that could be a difference maker for him. Heading into Sunday, among batters with a 60-plus plate appearance total since April 30th, Campbell ranks the lowest in all of Major League Baseball with a 104 batting average. Also the lowest in on-base percentage at 155, the lowest in slugging at 149, the lowest in OPS at 304, and also the lowest in weighted runs created plus. He was at minus 24 in that category. The only other player in the negatives with 60-plus plate appearances since April 30th is Trevor Story with a minus 2 weighted runs created plus. So obviously both those guys are struggling heavily. Campbell's down to 224 for batting average this season with just 5 home runs. In his first 28 career games, he hit .313 with 4 home runs, 12 runs batted in, a 935 OPS, and a 420 on-base percentage. And then obviously now over the past 2 or 3 weeks, he has definitely struggled. That's expected at times, especially for a young player when they first make it up to the major leagues. Teams adjust, and then obviously you have to adjust as well, and you might get lucky right away. But the major leagues, you face so many pitches, and you obviously have 4 or 5 at-bats a day. It's easy to get in a slump, especially as a young player. So I'm not completely giving up hope. He's only 22 years old, so you can't overreact too much. But the reality is, the way this Red Sox lineup is right now, there's no one in this lineup that should keep Masataka Yoshida out of the lineup if he is healthy. And this isn't a knock on Campbell. This is just a knock on the Red Sox in general with the way they've treated the Masataka Yoshida situation. Yoshida, I think, is the best contact hitter on this Red Sox team. And the Red Sox have really struggled in situational hitting. Look at Saturday night against Baltimore. The Red Sox had runners on first and second with no outs in the 8th inning. And they couldn't move either runner up and failed to score a run in that inning. And that's a game they ended up losing by 1 run. So situational hitting has to be better for this Red Sox team. And then heading into yesterday, in the prior 3 games against Baltimore, the Red Sox were 2 for 20 with runners in scoring position. It's time to get Masataka Yoshida in this lineup. If he is fully healthy after he recovers from his shoulder injury, and I know he's in Worcester right now, and he's been throwing a little bit at Fenway Park before games. If he is healthy, the Red Sox need to get him in this lineup. As I mentioned, there's nobody in this Red Sox lineup, especially now with Alex Bregman being hurt and Rafael Devers being at DH. There's nobody in this Red Sox lineup that should hold Masataka Yoshida out of the lineup. There's nobody in this lineup that should hold him out of the lineup. And I know DH is going to be Devis, so you don't really have a place there for him. But maybe you throw Yoshida in left field and you take whatever defense he gives you out there, considering how valuable of a piece he could be at the plate as a hitter for this Red Sox team. As I mentioned, I think he's the best contact hitter on this Red Sox team besides maybe Bregman. A lot of people gave up on Yoshida very quickly, and I know that's just a popular thing to do in the media. A lot of people gave up on him as fans. Then obviously the media turned against him as well. But this dude can absolutely ball. I'm a big fan of Masataka Yoshida, and I'm hoping he's in this Red Sox lineup rather soon because they do really need him. Now moving on to Trevor Story. What's the story with him? And these stats, as I've mentioned, these are stats heading into Sunday's game against Baltimore. He has a -2 weighted runs created plus, which is the second lowest among batters with 60-plus plate appearances since April 30th. Since April 30th, heading into Sunday's game against Baltimore, he had a .381 OPS over that stretch since April 30th, the third lowest in the MLB, a .146 batting average, the fourth worst in the MLB, a .195 slugging percentage, the third worst in the MLB. He's going to likely end up being a platoon player at some point, and he had a lot of bad advanced metrics as well. He was in the 6th percentile in chase percentage, meaning he's chasing a lot of pitches that are outside the zone, 15th percentile in whiff percentage, he's swinging and missing a lot, in the 6th percentile in strikeout percentage. He has a 30.2% strikeout percentage this year, which is the 6th worst in the MLB. He's in the 9th percentile in walk percentage, walking just 4.2% of the time, which is 10th worst in the MLB, and also 5th percentile in squared up percentage. So obviously he's not been good in a lot of these advanced metrics categories at the plate. The only value he's really added to this Red Sox team is the solid base running, and he's been reliable as a shortstop on defense. But the Red Sox have to make a decision here with Trevor Story. I like Trevor Story a lot, and I'm rooting for him to figure things out. But the reality is that his at-bats are going to get cut down at some point the way he's been playing. He'll stop being better, I think, if he takes more pitches. His walk percentage is very low. I think once he starts taking more pitches and is a little bit more patient at the plate, I think his numbers will go up as a hitter. I think he can be a lot more productive if he starts taking more pitches and being more selective. He's swinging at 55% of the pitches he faces, which is around 15th most in the MLB, and obviously swinging and missing a lot. So I do think he has to be more selective at some point. So now moving on really quick, I'm going to run down these things very fast. Paul Skenes and the trade rumors around him. I don't think Pittsburgh will dare to trade him for a team that's really struggled drafting, losing their ace, who is under contract and under team control through the 2029 season. It would be a very tough move for them to make. Pittsburgh, the 19-35 overall heading into yesterday, the 4th worst record in the MLB. Skenes on the year, though, 3-5 record, 2.36 ERA, 2.63 FIP. In his career, in his first 34 starts, he has a 2.1 ERA, a 14-8 record, with a 2.1 ERA, as I mentioned, a 2.51 FIP, and 10.7 strikeouts per 9 innings. I do not expect Pittsburgh to make a move there. I know a lot of people have been making a lot of articles in the media about him potentially being a trade candidate. I do not expect them to trade him. What is going on with the Colorado Rockies? I'm not going to dive in too much into where the numbers are at right now, but heading into yesterday, they were 9-44 overall with a 170 win percentage and 3-17 in their last 20 games. They did fire Bud Black, which was obviously expected considering how poorly they've been playing. This Rockies team has really struggled. They're on pace to be the worst MLB team in history, following last year's Chicago White Sox, who really struggled, and they were the worst MLB team, record-wise in MLB history. This Rockies team is somehow worse with a 9-44 record on the year. And they've had a lot of guys that just have not really panned out, and you can't really put it on one or two players, especially considering where their record is. But Chris Bryant, he's out for the season. He's making $27 million a year. Kyle Freeland has really struggled. He has a 0-7 record with a 5.86 ERA. He's making $16 million. And then you look at Ryan McMahon. He's making $12 million. He only has a 2.11 batting average with a 7.02 OPS on the year. Just a lot of these players that are getting paid heavily have not been producing. And obviously a lot of the young pieces as well have struggled, especially early on this season. This team only has 9 wins in their first 54 games of the season. And if you want to see how this stacks up to the White Sox team last year, who set the record for the most losses in modern history, they started 15-35 in their first 50 games last season, finishing the season with 41 wins and 121 losses. Through 50 games this season, the Rockies were 8-42, the most losses in the first 50 games in MLB history. And it seems like the way things are looking, they're going to set the record that the White Sox set last season. Now moving on to the Baltimore Orioles. The question is, has their window closed? They're 18-34 overall. The third worst record in the MLB heading into yesterday, 5-15 in their last 20 games heading into yesterday, and also adding in a 9-21 record over the last 30 games heading into yesterday. They're now 19-34 overall. They did win yesterday against St. Louis, but all of these numbers that I have compiled here were all ahead of that game yesterday against St. Louis. They've just been really bad pitching. Their downfall has been pitching this year. 42 home runs allowed in 22 games in May, heading into yesterday, the most in the MLB. Also allowing 84 home runs as a team this season, the most in the MLB as well. They had a 3.94 team ERA last year, which was right around the middle of the pack in the MLB at 14th overall. This year, 5.5 team ERA just about, which is second worst in the MLB. 5.45 team ERA. Charlie Morton and Kyle Gibson were not the solutions to letting Corbin Burnes walk in free agency to Arizona. They've also been struggling hitting, though. They had a .236 team batting average heading into yesterday, the ninth worst in the MLB. Adley Rutschman has been struggling at the plate, .211 batting average heading into yesterday, 5 home runs and a .659 OPS. Some of his advanced metrics are okay, 93rd percentile or better in squared up percentage, chase percentage, and whiff percentage. And his expected batting average is .268, so he's been a little bit unlucky this season. So maybe with those advanced metrics and obviously the expected batting average being higher as well, maybe that's a sign that things will turn around for him. Jackson Holliday has played a lot better this season, which is a good sign for them, considering people kind of gave up on him a little too quick last year after he struggled. There are some top prospects, though, that have really not lived up to the hype so far for the Orioles. One of them being Heston Kjerstad, who is hitting .202 heading into yesterday with 4 home runs, 15 runs batted in, and a .577 OPS. In his career across 3 seasons in the MLB, he's only hit 10 home runs in 97 games, with .225 for a batting average, a .663 OPS, with 80 strikeouts to 17 walks, which is definitely a cause for concern there. Just 17 walks in 97 games is very low and definitely concerning. Another guy is Kobe Mayo, who's hitting just 5 for 59 in his short MLB stint over the last 2 seasons, with an .094 batting average this season and a .281 OPS across 21 games. Jordan Westburg, another guy that struggled. He did hit 18 home runs last season, but this year, a .217 batting average with a .657 OPS, 4 home runs, and 6 RBIs. And then another one of their former top prospects, Colton Cowser, who's currently injured. He's only played 4 games this season, hitting .125 with a .535 OPS and a home run. He struggled a little bit average-wise last season, hitting just .242, but he did have 24 home runs, 69 runs batted in, and a .768 OPS. Don't really need to necessarily pull the fire alarm on him since he has shown potential at the major league level. But for those other guys, Kjerstad, Mayo, and Westburg, they've all struggled, in different varieties at the major league level. Kjerstad really hasn't shown the power that he was supposed to when he was first drafted by the Orioles as a top pick. And the same thing with Mayo. He's been really struggling as a contact hitter in the major leagues. And then obviously Westburg has shown some power, but hitting just .217 for a batting average with a .657 OPS so far this season. And a lot of these guys are young. Cowser, Mayo, Westburg, Kjerstad. They were all top prospects of the Orioles for a reason. But they are part of the reason the Orioles haven't really necessarily lived up to where they were supposed to at this point. Over the past couple seasons, the Orioles, had a lot of wins, winning over 100 games 2 years ago and winning 93 games last year. And then this year, things are a little bit disappointing for them. And I think it's because they expected a lot of these position prospects to really pan out, and they really haven't. I mean, Cowser is a good player. I'm not going to really talk about just him. He's been really good, but the only reason I mentioned him is because this year he's only played 4 games, and that's supposed to be a bigger piece of their lineup. But Kjerstad, Mayo, Westburg all struggling, and then you added Adley Rutschman struggles this year as well. You can't really necessarily give up on any of these guys with, those guys being Mayo, Westburg, and Kjerstad since they're all very young. But it is concerning that they really haven't put together, enough production at the major league level. They all had great potential as prospects. They really haven't just shown that, though, at the major league level just yet, especially consistency-wise. None of them have had consistency, and that's definitely an issue. So all of these things are definitely concerning for the Orioles, and obviously they need these 3 guys that I mentioned, Kjerstad, Mayo, and Westburg, all to be better because they all were top prospects, and these were guys they were banking on a few years ago when they were figuring out who to trade and who not to trade. In a lot of these deals when they went out and got Corbin Burnes, they had to figure out who they were going to move. They kept these guys for a reason, and obviously things just haven't really necessarily worked out just yet. Also, you add in Grayson Rodriguez's injury. That's been disappointing, and then letting Corbin Burnes go as well. Things haven't gone the Orioles' way over the last year. I know they went ice cold in the playoffs hitting, and then obviously now, they've been struggling hitting, and obviously pitching's been an issue too. Pitching was an issue for them in the past. I think that's one thing now they look at is they probably wish they brought Corbin Burnes back since having an ace is so important, especially in the AL East, a division that's really struggled. Besides the Yankees, the AL East has struggled this year. It's kind of wide open. If you had good pitching, the Orioles might be a better team overall, but I'm not going to necessarily say the window's closed. It's only been, we're 55 games almost through the season. I wouldn't necessarily say the window's completely closed. Maybe this year they're not going to go out, make the World Series this year, but I wouldn't completely give up on their future just yet. But it is definitely concerning the way things look right now. They have to figure it out. I don't know if they're going to do it this season, as I mentioned, being 19-34 overall, 53 games into the season. You don't really expect them to make a run in the playoffs at this point. They've put themselves in too deep of a hole probably to try to make a run of the playoffs this season, but you want to see progress out of this team. You don't want to see them being 9-21 over a 30-game stretch and 5-15 over a 20-game stretch. I think their roster is better than what they've shown, but obviously with the pitching being, abysmal and obviously the hitting as well being a problem, they've just been a bad team overall, and that's why they ended up firing Brandon Hyde, because they were just struggling and obviously needed somebody to blame. But these players need to be better as well. It's not always just on the coach. The players obviously have some accountability and need to be better as well, especially with the way they've looked as of late. A lot of these guys that I mentioned, like Mayo, Kjerstad, Westberg, those are all really young players, so there is a chance they can, turn things around and, progress and obviously be the player that everybody thought they would be as prospects. But as of right now, those are three players that are struggling to live up to the name that they had as a prospect before they reached the MLB. But they're all young players, so they can pan out. But the way things have looked, those are three players that are struggling. And I'm not completely blaming the Orioles' struggles on them. I just know when people looked at the Orioles the last 2 years before things obviously went downhill this year, prior to this year, they had a lot of promise because of those top positional prospects that were coming up and that were being added to a lineup that was already really good that won 100 games 2 years ago. So we'll see how things work out for the Orioles. I wouldn't say completely that their window is closed. As I mentioned, this year, it's a long shot they make a run and make the playoffs. Very unlikely. But I wouldn't completely say, let's say next year, they can't bounce back. If this continues to get really, really bad this year, and who knows what they do at the trade deadline, maybe things will change and my perspective will change on how I feel about them in the future. But the way things look right now, I'm not completely giving up on the Orioles in their future. I still think there is some talent in this team they can work with. Obviously, pitching is a major need, and letting Corbin Burnes go was a major mistake. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. Hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.